My parents faked a mental disability to keep my college fund, they gave it to my sister, spent the rest, and now they might owe me over $150,000. Just last week, I learned something that completely flipped my view of my family. Turns out, my parents had set up a college fund for me when I was born, but instead of telling me about it or using it for my education, they emptied it out to pay for my younger sister's college. I'm 24 now, and she's 20. I never went to college because my parents were always very clear. They didn't have the money to help. They told me flat out that if I wanted to go, I'd need to find a way to cover it myself. So, I didn't go. I didn't even try. I went straight into the workforce after high school. My first job was at a gas station, just to get on my feet. Eventually, I got hired at a retail store in the mall, and I've been working full-time ever since 6 years now, just grinding to stay afloat. Meanwhile, my sister Emily started college 2 years ago. She's attending a private university that charges something like $45,000 a year. I always figured she had scholarships or financial aid or something. I never asked. Honestly, I tried not to think too much about it because I didn't want to let it turn me bitter. Back in high school, I did pretty well. I had solid grades, I was in the honor society, and I actually dreamed of majoring in business or accounting. But every time I brought it up, my parents reminded me how broke we supposedly were. They kept saying they couldn't afford to help me with college. They encouraged me to apply for scholarships but made it clear I'd be on my own financially, even for something like community college. So eventually, I gave up on the idea. I found out about the college fund by complete accident. I was over at my parents' place for one of those monthly family dinners they force everyone to attend. Emily was there too. After we ate, my dad asked me to grab a folder from his office, something to do with helping my uncle with taxes. So I went in, opened the filing cabinet, and started digging around for it. That's when I saw a folder labeled with my name. I wasn't even snooping, it was just sitting there in the middle of everything. I opened it, expecting maybe old school records or medical stuff. But it wasn't that. Inside were years' worth of bank statements from an account I'd never heard of. An account in my name. It had been opened when I was a baby, and both my parents and grandparents had been making deposits into it for years. The deposits were regular until I turned 18. The most recent statement showed a balance of just over $13,000. Then I saw a handwritten note stapled to it that said, "Transferred to Emily's education fund, dated 4 years ago." I brought the whole folder downstairs with me and asked my parents what the hell it was. My mom looked like she'd seen a ghost. My dad immediately got angry and said I had no right going through their private files. I told him the folder had my name on it, and the account was in my name. How was that not my business? That's when things got weird. My mom started crying. My dad sat me down and finally admitted there had been a college fund set aside for me, but since I didn't go to college, they decided it made more sense to give the money to Emily. I was stunned. I told them I didn't choose to skip college. They told me for years that they couldn't afford to help. They shut down every conversation I tried to have about school. They knew I got into colleges. They knew I wanted to go. But they always said no. So I stopped pushing and found a job instead. My dad actually tried to spin it like I should be glad the money stayed in the family. That was his way of making it okay. Emily sat there looking incredibly awkward. She claimed she didn't know any of this, that she believed the money had been saved for her all along. My mom kept crying and repeating that they did what they thought was right. I didn't yell. I didn't argue. I just left, got in my car, drove back to my apartment, and haven't answered any of their calls or texts since. Emily texted me a few times saying she was sorry and swore she had no clue. My parents? They've been blowing up my phone, my mom especially, leaving voicemails saying they want to explain everything. But what is there to explain? That money could have opened real doors for me. I could have gone to school. I might have had a career by now instead of clocking retail hours for 6 straight years. Meanwhile, my sister's getting a $45,000 a year education with money that was supposed to be mine. I've been doing research online, trying to figure out if what they did is even legal. The account had my name on it, but since I was a minor, they were probably listed as the custodians. From what I've read, that means they may have had control until I turned 18, but after that? It's a gray area. A friend told me I should consult a lawyer. Another one said I should just cut ties and move on. I don't know which one's right. A part of me feels like I need to see if I have any legal standing. Even if I can't recover the full amount, maybe I can get some of it back. I mean, I'm still young. I could still go to college. I'm only 24, it's not like the door is completely closed. My lease is coming up next month anyway. I've been thinking of moving to a cheaper place farther out, maybe outside the city. But now I'm wondering if I should just leave altogether, new city, new state, cut ties completely. Then again, that almost feels like letting them off easy. I ended up calling my grandparents, my mom's parents. They're the ones who originally started the fund when I was born. They had no idea the money was redirected to Emily. They honestly thought I had chosen not to use it. When I told them what happened, they were shocked. My grandfather said he was going to talk to my parents and try to sort it out. I haven't heard anything since. Update 1: 3 weeks have passed since I found out about the college fund. I ended up meeting with a lawyer who offered a free first consultation. I brought copies of the bank statements I found. After looking them over, he said I might have a case, especially if the account was a custodial one under the Uniform Transfers to Minors Act. Apparently, depending on the state, the money legally becomes mine once I hit 18 or 21. If my parents pulled the funds after that without my permission, it could be considered fraud. He told me he'd need the original account setup documents to be sure. He asked if I'd be willing to request them either from the bank or from my parents. I decided to try the bank first. He also explained his fees, and yeah, I definitely can't afford them right now. He advised me to try and resolve things with my parents directly first, and only take legal steps if that fails. So the next day, I went to the credit union where my parents have always banked. I showed them my ID and asked about the account. But the bank employee said they couldn't give me any information. Apparently, my name is no longer attached to it. I left and just sat in my car for a while, feeling stuck. Eventually, I texted my parents. I told them I wanted copies of the original account documents and a clear explanation of what happened. My dad replied quickly, saying they'd explain everything if I came over in person. I told him no, I want to see the documents first. After I told my dad I wouldn't come over without seeing the documents first, he just never replied. Total silence. Later that night, my sister gave me a call. She said our parents were really shaken up and had been upset ever since I found the folder. She still insisted she had no clue the money had originally been meant for me. She sounded sincere. Said if she'd known, she would have never taken a dime of it. Then she asked if we could talk in person. I agreed, mostly because I didn't want to believe she was part of this mess. We met the next day at a little cafe between our apartments. She looked worn out, pale, with dark circles under her eyes. Said she hadn't been sleeping well. Apparently, the guilt had been eating at her since everything came to light. She told me our parents always claimed they were paying for her tuition out of their savings and investments. She never thought to question it. Why would she? They were acting like everything was under control. She asked what I planned to do now. I mentioned I'd talked to a lawyer, and she immediately tensed up. She asked if I was seriously considering taking legal action against mom and dad. I said I hadn't decided yet, but I deserved to know the full story, and I had a right to what was supposed to be mine. She got quiet, then asked if I was trying to force her to drop out of school. I told her no, that wasn't my intention at all. She's already halfway through her degree. But I told her plainly, our parents screwed me over, and they needed to find a way to make it right. She looked helpless. Said there was no way they could replace that kind of money now. Most of it was already gone, used on her tuition, her housing, everything. I asked how much it cost. She said around $45,000 a year. That's $90,000 already gone, and another $90,000 still needed if she finishes. She never applied for scholarships or aid either. Our parents told her not to bother, that they'd take care of it. She believed them. After that conversation, I sat down and sent my parents an email. I told them I wanted full transparency when and how the account was opened, the exact timeline of the money transfer, and what they planned to do to fix this. A few hours later, my mom replied. She said the account had been a savings account set up when I was born, with her and my dad as the official account holders. It was for my benefit, she wrote. When I chose not to go to college, they figured I didn't need it, and used it to fund Emily's education instead. She apologized for not talking to me about it first. I answered right away. I reminded her that I never chose anything. I wanted to go to college, but they told me over and over that there was no money. That they couldn't help. So I gave up. I asked why they lied. Her next message didn't touch that. She just said they thought they were making the best decision for the family. That they believed I could handle myself, while Emily needed their support. I've started looking into college again. There's a state school not far from me that offers night and weekend classes. I could work my job and go part-time. But even with in-state tuition, it would take me years to finish. I'd need loans, maybe grants, and it'd still be a stretch. That money, my money, could have covered everything. Tuition, books, rent. It could have set me up. Just like it's doing for her. Last week, my grandparents called. They'd talked to my parents. My grandfather was furious. He told me he and my grandmother contributed to that fund regularly for years, specifically for me. If they'd known what my parents were planning to do, they would have structured it differently, maybe locked it down legally. He offered to help pay for a lawyer. I accepted. Still, I picked up extra shifts at work to build a safety net for legal costs. I don't want to rely too much on anyone else again. A few days later, I got an email from my dad. He said he wanted to put this misunderstanding behind us and invited me over for dinner on Sunday. I haven't responded. I don't see how this is a misunderstanding. They lied to me. 4 years. They made me believe there was nothing, while quietly funneling it all to my sister. How do you just move on from that? In the meantime, I picked up a second job delivering food on weekends. Between that and my day job, I'm working around 60 hours a week. It's exhausting, but at least it keeps me too busy to dwell on everything 24/7. Emily messaged again a few days ago. She said things at home have been tense. Mom's constantly crying, Dad's angry all the time, and they've been arguing nonstop since I found out. She begged me again to talk to them and try to work something out. I told her I'm still trying to figure things out. The lawyer followed up too. I told him what the bank said about the account. He told me that without the original documents, it's tough to say how strong my case is. But he suggested I send my parents a formal letter requesting full documentation on the account and a detailed breakdown of where the money went. If they refused or ignored it, that could actually help build my case later. So I did it. Drafted the letter last night. I'm mailing it tomorrow, certified mail, so I'll know exactly when they get it. I still haven't decided about that dinner. Part of me wants to stay far away and never see them again. But another part of me wants to sit across the table, look them in the eye, and ask how they could do this to me. I'm torn. My lease is up in 5 days. I thought about moving, getting out of the city entirely, but I decided to stay. For now. Moving costs money, and right now, I need to hold on to every dollar I can. Plus, walking away feels like letting them win. I want some kind of resolution even if I have to fight for it. Lately, I keep thinking back to all the times I struggled over the past 6 years. When my car broke down and I couldn't afford the repair, I rode the bus for hours every day just to get to work. When I got sick but didn't go to a doctor because I couldn't afford it, so I just stayed home and suffered. When birthdays or holidays came around and I barely had enough for a small gift, I made it through all of that while they sat on money that was supposed to be mine. And you know what? I think the worst part is that I would have understood if they had just told me the truth. If they'd said, we saved some money, but it's not enough for a full university. Maybe you should look into community college, I would have listened. I would have made it work. But they didn't say that. They looked me in the face and said there was nothing because they'd already decided to give it all to my sister. And here's the kicker, she's majoring in art history. She wants to work in a museum. It's not exactly the most practical path. Meanwhile, I wanted to study accounting, something with stability, a real future. I could have been building a career by now. But instead, she gets to chase her dream with my money, while I'm clocking into retail shifts and delivering takeout just to stay afloat. I haven't slept right in weeks. I'm constantly exhausted, but every time I lay down, my brain won't stop. I replay fake arguments with my parents. Scenes that never actually happened. Things I wish I'd said. Things I probably never will. Update 2. It's been a month since that last update. A lot has changed. I didn't go to that dinner. Instead, I mailed the letter my lawyer and I put together. Sent it certified so there'd be no doubt when they received it. The letter asked for everything: a copy of the original account setup, a detailed list of how every dollar was spent, and a plan to repay me. I gave them 2 weeks to respond before I took further action. That was the lawyer's way of saying, this is your last chance before I sue you. 3 days after they signed for the letter, my dad showed up at my apartment. No warning. Just knocked on my door. He showed up at my door while I was getting ready for my evening delivery shift. I hadn't even zipped up my jacket when I heard the knock. The second I opened the door, he barged right in without asking, letter in hand, face red like he'd been building up steam the whole drive over. He launched straight into a rant, accusing me of being ungrateful and selfish. Said he couldn't believe I was actually threatening to take legal action against my own parents after everything they'd done for me. According to him, they had supported me my entire life and I had no right to come after them now. I kept my cool and told him that if he wasn't willing to talk like an adult, he needed to leave. That only made him more furious. He accused me of ripping the family apart over just money. Claimed Emily was devastated, said she couldn't believe I tried to ruin her education. He said my mom hadn't stopped crying since the day they got my letter. I asked him about the documents I'd requested, the original account paperwork, a breakdown of how the money was used. He said they didn't have them anymore. When I pressed about how the money was spent, he claimed they didn't track every single expense. I told him I wasn't asking for an exact dollar-by-dollar account, just a general overview. According to him, it went toward Emily's tuition and housing, and that's all I needed to know. That was the end of it, as far as he was concerned. Then I brought up the repayment plan, and that's when he lost it completely. He exploded, saying there was nothing to repay because legally, the money was never mine in the first place. The account was under their control, and they had every right to use it however they wanted. He said he'd hoped to help me go to college, but once I chose a different path, they used the funds to support Emily instead. I reminded him again that I never chose anything. They were the ones who told me, over and over, that they couldn't afford to help me. I asked how he could possibly think I wasn't serious about college when I had good grades and acceptance letters from multiple schools. He didn't have an answer for that. Eventually, I told him I had to leave for work and that the conversation was over. As he got up, he turned and said if I wanted to stay part of this family, I needed to let this go. And then he walked out. I stood there, hands shaking, heart racing. I ended up calling in sick to my delivery shift. There was no way I could smile at customers or drive around like nothing had happened. The next day, my mom started calling me. I didn't pick up. She left voicemails saying they wanted to talk, that they still loved me, and they didn't want to lose me over money. Family's more important than money, she kept saying. I texted back one sentence, if family mattered more than money, you wouldn't have lied to me for years and given away the college fund meant for me. Emily messaged me too. She told me our dad punched a hole in the wall after leaving my apartment. Mom was so upset she had to take the day off work. Emily begged me to stop with the legal stuff and just talk to them. Said she felt like she was caught in the middle and didn't know what to do. She even offered to pay me back herself after she graduated, but admitted it would take years. I had another conversation with my lawyer. I told him my parents still weren't providing any documents, and they refused to talk about a meaningful repayment. He said we could take the next step, file a lawsuit and legally compel them to produce the records, but warned me that it would be expensive and uncertain. His advice? Try one more time to resolve it peacefully before diving into court. So I wrote another email. This one was direct, but calm. I laid out exactly what I needed, copies of all documents related to the account, a breakdown of how the money was spent, and a written repayment plan. I said I was hoping we could handle this privately, but if they didn't respond within a week, I was prepared to move forward with legal action. 5 days later, my dad finally replied. They'd talked it over and decided they could repay $20,000. It would be paid back over 5 years, around $333 per month. That was all they could afford, he said. He hoped it would be enough for me to drop everything and rebuild the relationship. There was no mention of the account paperwork. No accounting. Just that. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. He said it was a step, sure, but without anything in writing, it was meaningless. They could stop paying at any time. And even if they didn't, $20,000 was well below what I was owed. He advised me not to accept it unless it came with full documentation and a signed agreement. So I replied. I thanked them for being willing to discuss repayment, but said I still needed the original documents and a record of how the money was spent. I also pointed out that $20,000 wasn't enough, considering the account had over $13,000 in it before it was drained and spent on 2 years of Emily's private university education. I asked them to think about increasing the amount and paying it back over a shorter period. Not long after I sent that, my mom called. She was crying again. She said they didn't have the documents anymore and couldn't possibly afford more than $20,000 without putting themselves into serious financial trouble. She told me they were already planning to take out a second mortgage on their house to cover what they'd offered. Then she asked if I really wanted to push my own parents into debt, just to punish them. I told her this wasn't about revenge. It was about fairness. About reclaiming something that was supposed to be mine. I reminded her that they watched me struggle for years, watched me ride buses, skip doctor appointments, work myself sick, while they sat on money they knew I never stopped needing. I asked her how she would have felt if someone did that to her. She didn't answer. Just kept repeating that they thought they were doing what was best. Last week, my grandparents called again. They wanted an update. I told them everything about my dad showing up at my place, the $20,000 offer, and what my lawyer said. My grandfather went quiet. Then he said he needed to check something and would call me back. The next day, he called again and asked if we could meet for lunch. I said yes. We met at a small restaurant near his house. My grandmother came too. They both looked uneasy. After we ordered, my grandfather pulled out a folder. He said he'd gone through some old files and found something he thought I needed to see. Inside the folder was a copy of their will dated 15 years ago, along with other legal paperwork. He pointed out a section that mentioned a trust fund created for my college education. According to the document, my parents were the designated managers of the trust until I turned 18. At that point, it was supposed to transfer to me and be used solely for educational purposes. I asked if this was the same account I'd found at their house. He wasn't sure, but he thought so. He said they'd been contributing to it since I was a baby, and over the years, other money had been added too, including some from my parents and from a life insurance payout after my other grandparents died. Then I asked why, if the trust was set up that way, my parents had access to the money in the first place. My grandfather looked confused. He said they'd never changed the will. That trust should have transferred to me when I turned 18. Legally, my parents shouldn't have been able to touch it. The next morning, I took the folder to my lawyer. After my lawyer reviewed the documents from my grandparents, everything changed. If the money really came from a trust they had set up specifically for me, and if the terms stated that it should have transferred to me when I turned 18, then my parents had absolutely no legal right to touch it, let alone spend it. We had to find out exactly what happened, how they accessed the trust, what they did with it, and whether they had any legal cover for their actions. My lawyer wrote a much more formal legal notice, this time demanding every document related to that trust and any accounts tied to it. If my parents didn't cooperate, we were ready to file a lawsuit and subpoena the records directly from the bank. Based on what I'd been shown, he said our case was much stronger than he initially believed. I sent the letter by certified mail again. 3 days after it was delivered, my dad called. Furious doesn't even begin to describe it. He shouted that I was crossing a line, accusing me of turning on my own family, of breaking my mother's heart, of threatening to sue the very people who raised me. He said if I went through with this, I'd regret it forever. I stayed calm. I told him all I wanted was the truth and what was rightfully mine. If they had nothing to hide, then handing over the documents shouldn't be a problem. He hung up. Later that day, Emily texted me. She said our parents had told her everything now and asked if we could meet in person. We went back to the same cafe. She looked even worse than before, tired, defeated. She said the house had been constant chaos since my last letter. Our parents had been fighting non-stop. Then she dropped the bomb. Our mom had finally admitted that not all the money went to her tuition. Some of it was used for home renovations. And a family vacation to Europe they took a few years ago. Emily said she felt physically sick hearing that. I told her about the documents my grandparents had shown me. She broke down crying at the table. She said she didn't know what to do anymore. She was halfway through school and didn't think she could afford to continue without our parents' support. She asked if I was really going to sue them. I told her the truth, I didn't want to. But I couldn't ignore what they did. I needed justice. I needed the truth. She nodded slowly. Said she understood. The next day, I got an email from my mom. They were now offering to increase the repayment amount to $50,000, to be paid over 3 years. She said they'd try to get whatever documents they could from the bank and begged me not to take legal action while they worked to make things right. I forwarded the email to my lawyer. He said the increased offer showed they were finally taking this seriously. But even $50,000 was still well below what I was likely entitled to, especially if they used part of the money on non-educational expenses. He advised me to wait until we saw the documents before making any decisions. So that's where things stood. Waiting. Again. Meanwhile, he began preparing the lawsuit just in case. My sister was stuck in the middle, torn between her future and the wreckage our parents caused. My grandparents were heartbroken that the trust they'd built for me was twisted into something it was never meant to be. And I was still working both jobs, trying to stash away enough cash to finally enroll in some college classes next semester if I ever got a chance. I'm still not sleeping well. The exhaustion is constant now. Between work, the legal stress, and the emotional weight of all this, I feel like I'm running on fumes. But at least I'm not standing still anymore. At least I'm finally doing something to fight back. I don't know if I'll ever have a real relationship with my parents again. I honestly don't. But I do know I can't just let this go. Not after what they did. Not when they watched me struggle for years, knowing they had money saved for me, then used it for themselves and handed the rest to my sister like I never mattered. I want the truth. I want accountability. And I want the shot at an education that should have been mine from the beginning. Update 3. 2 more weeks have passed and things just got heavier. My parents finally sent over some of the documents I'd been asking for. They included copies of how the account was set up, some old statements, and the official transfer paperwork from 4 years ago. My lawyer went over everything. It was worse than I imagined. Turns out, the account wasn't just a casual college fund opened by my parents, it was a formal trust, established by my grandparents with a $25,000 initial deposit when I was born. The terms were crystal clear. The money was to be used exclusively for my education. My parents were named as trustees until I turned 18. After that, it was supposed to become mine fully and directly. The statements showed consistent deposits from my grandparents over the years. There were occasional smaller ones from my parents, too. When my other grandparents passed away when I was 12, some of their life insurance money was added as well. By the time I graduated high school, the account held over $13,000. Then came the real betrayal. According to the transfer records, when I turned 18, my parents went to the bank and somehow got the trusteeship extended illegally. They didn't hand it over to me like they were supposed to. Instead, they claimed I had a cognitive disability and wasn't capable of handling the money on my own. They submitted falsified medical records and got some doctor to sign off on it. I've never been diagnosed with any kind of mental or cognitive condition. I have no idea who this doctor is or how they convinced him to go along with it. By pulling that stunt, they kept full control of the account, left it in my name for 2 more years, and then right before Emily started college, they emptied it. Most of the money went into a new account for her education. But not all of it. Roughly $30,000 was moved to other accounts. Based on the timing, it lines up perfectly with the renovations and that Europe trip. My lawyer was stunned. He said this wasn't just fraud, it was serious fraud. They forged medical documentation, misrepresented my mental state, and violated the legal terms of a trust. We weren't just looking at financial recovery anymore, we could potentially sue for damages. When I saw the paperwork, I didn't even react at first. I just sat there, numb. I'd known they lied. But I never imagined they'd go this far. That they'd create a fake disability just to keep control of money that was never theirs. It felt like a whole new level of betrayal. My lawyer said we should give them one last chance before going to court. He wrote up a demand letter that laid everything out: the fraud, the forged records, the trust violations. He demanded full repayment $13,000 from the original trust, another $30,000 for what was diverted to personal expenses, plus interest on the full amount. Total? A little over $150,000. We gave them 10 days to respond. I sent that one certified too. 2 days later, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It was a lawyer, their lawyer. They wanted to talk settlement. My lawyer told me not to say anything directly, and said he'd handle it. They spoke the next day. Afterward, my lawyer called with the update. My parents were offering $75,000 to be paid over 5 years in monthly installments. He said I could reject it. It wasn't enough, not after everything we'd discovered. He suggested we counter with the full $150,000, but give them the option of a longer payment plan if needed. While that was going on, Emily called me. She told me she was thinking about dropping out of school and getting a job to help pay me back. That broke my heart. I told her no. This wasn't her doing. She shouldn't sacrifice her future because of our parents' mistakes. We'd figure something out that didn't ruin her life too. She thanked me and told me she was furious at them. She'd moved out and was staying with a friend. She said she couldn't even look at them right now. Honestly? I get it. I'm drained. Working both jobs. Fighting this legal battle. Watching my family fall apart. It's too much sometimes. I'm trying to hang in there, but I'm running on fumes. I'll update again when I know more about the settlement. Right now, I just need to sleep. Thanks for sticking with me through this. I'll be back when I can.